Alright. Greetings, Starfighters. I'm going to need to be quick about this because I'm having a bit of an issue with the camera. I have to physically hold the battery in order for the connection to stay in place. Hammerhead is the next movie we have here on Season 10 of Shameless Cashgrab. It's another R-rated movie. Hopefully that will actually mean something this time. And okay, about characters. Yeah. Sorry about that. I was just looking to see if I recognized any of the actors' names. None of them are really hitting at the moment, and my hand is starting to hurt. Yeah. Hopefully, I can find out what the issue is here with the battery. I think I have an idea. Um, but yeah, let's go right into Hammerhead. Alrighty, and I have now watched Hammerhead from 1968, and I just realized I forgot to put this in the script, so I'm going to go ahead and mention this now. This is like the third movie out of 6 on this set that, despite being labeled as a Cold War thriller, it's not actually a thriller. It's more of a comedy, I think. That's debatable. More of a comedy like Otley, or not. And it's not really about the Cold War. I mean, NATO comes up in it, but I don't think Russia or the Soviet Union get mentioned even once. The bad guys are part of an independent criminal organization. So not sure why it's on this set. I think percentage-wise, this might actually be worse than the vampire movie set in terms of films that don't really fit the theme. But, I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Our plot summary, such as it is courtesy of IMDb. An American agent has tracked down the stronghold of an evil criminal mastermind determined to take over the world.
I am a banana!
Does anyone besides me remember why I do that? Anyway, the first thing about this movie that jumped out at me was the producer's name, Irving Allen. I wonder if he's any relation to Irwin Allen, creator of the original Lost in Space. The opening scene that the opening credits play over is, something. It's a trip, to be sure. The best description I can possibly give it is a bunch of hippies watching a really elaborate performance art piece. To be honest, I'm not sure I can describe any of this without you thinking I made it up. Such as the topless accordion player. Or the food fight that part of the audience takes part in. Or anything to do with the mannequins. Shit's weird is what I'm getting at. Our main character is here too, a guy named Hood. We know that based on 2 things. He's the only one wearing a suit, and the camera zooms in on him. An audience member comes up to him and tells him to expect a call from the titular Hammerhead, and the event is raided by cops talking about public decency. So, normal cops then. Boy, I miss the days when movies weren't required to pretend that people like this actually solve crimes or protect anything other than property. As the scene of a bunch of random people who weren't doing anything illegal, just weird, getting thrown around like rag dolls by uniformed agents of the state ends, Hood escapes the chaos in his car. As he drives away, one of the performers of the piece sits up, having been hiding in the back seat because, of course, as a secret agent, he would forget to lock his car while being in a foreign nation. The young woman asks him to at least help her find a taxi so she doesn't get arrested. Just to clear some stuff up here, while Hood is American, the plot of the movie, at least in the opening, is taking place in the UK, and then after that it moves to Portugal. I just realized I forgot to put that in the script too, but luckily I remembered for recording. And anyway, while letting the performer use his shower, he calls in to his British colleagues to let them know he'll be expecting a call shortly from their target. Hood tolerates the performer while waiting for the call, and she does not get the hint that he isn't interested, or at least isn't interested right now. She goes on a rant about art that's not necessarily wrong, but feels really out of place in a spy thriller. If this can even be called a thriller. More on that later. Especially this early when we know so little about our main characters yet. Safe bet she's going to be the love interest. Hood eventually receives the call he's been waiting for and heads to meet with someone at a place I'm not going to risk taking any screenshots of because the owner has a lot of nude paintings and statues, and YouTube was willing to hit Stephanie Sterling over Michelangelo's The Creation of Adam, so best not risk it. The Hammerhead person is not there, but his assistant provides Hood with a train ticket and a location to bring some crated items to Southampton. Leaving the building, Hood encounters a beaten and frightened older man in the elevator. When he tries to help, the man freaks out and runs off once the elevator reaches the parking garage, but he is accosted by two men, one of whom tries to stab Hood with a butterfly knife, and a fight scene ensues. Hood loses the fight. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, take a shot every time that happens in this movie. But the two thugs take off in their car with the older man instead of finishing him off because we're less than 15 minutes into the movie. I'm just going to leave that in. Two British agents arrive, and some jaunty music that's not really appropriate for the scene plays as they help Hood to his feet, and we jump cut to train tracks. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and get into this now. I'm not entirely sure the people who made this movie knew what they were making. It seems, and I haven't looked this up. I rarely do with such things. This show is, my initial reactions to things plus jokes. But the feeling I get is that the people making this movie couldn't decide if they were doing a pastiche of James Bond or a parody. And that really comes through because a lot of the time it feels like the movie is just ping-ponging back and forth between the two, tone-wise. Sometimes it seems like it's a serious spy thriller. Other times it seems like it's taking the piss out of serious spy thrillers. And, maybe this works for some people, but for me, I found it more than a little distracting. Okay, anyway, back to my snarky recap of the plot, or at least the parts of the plot that I could bring myself to care about. The cut to the train tracks that I was talking about, that was really abrupt. But we're on the train, and Hood is talking to another man who fills him in about a meeting involving people from NATO that is meant to be top secret. Hood asks what's in the crates he's been asked to take to Hammerhead, and the man tells him it's porn. I'm not kidding about that either. Apparently this particular collection is something Hammerhead has been after for years. So the performer from earlier, her name is Sue, turns up on the train, much to Hood's annoyance, and yeah, she basically stalked him. There's no point in sugarcoating it. That's going to make it all the more annoying if the movie ends with these two making out. Hood doesn't need to get into her pants, he needs a restraining order. Hood eventually meets up with another associate of Hammerhead who takes him out on a small boat to Hammerhead's yacht, which, compared to the yachts used by the ultra-wealthy these days, could almost be considered modest. Still rooting for the orcas, though, if you catch my drift. Hood is taken to a room on the yacht with more nude paintings. I'm starting to see where the R rating came from. We haven't seen any non-painting nudity as yet. The accordion player I mentioned earlier was only seen from the side and was covered partially by the accordion. But the amount we're getting from the artwork alone is more than you might see on a walk through a museum. There's a segment with a woman dancing in one of the rooms on the yacht while Hood and a slightly drunk man who was off screen until the end of it, and it lasts way too long. The title character arrives by way of... Let me try and describe this properly here. He's seated in an elaborate closet thing that gets lowered from a small cargo helicopter. That'll do, I guess. Yeah, I'm wishing I used clips on this show again. Now I'm trying to remember if I got any pictures of the seated closet thing in the screen caps. Well, I'm sure you'll know it if you see it. Anyway, this is where Hammerhead and Hood finally meet for the first time in the movie, and he of course immediately shows us how evil he is by inflicting pain on the dancing woman from earlier for no apparent reason. And he has his helicopter lower another closet with a chair in it, or whatever these things are supposed to be called, and Sue is in it. Hammerhead describes her as a surprise he picked up in Lisbon, and she seems to have very little clue where she is, though she seems to know enough to pretend not to know who Hood is. Hammerhead and Hood have a meeting in the former's office where Hammerhead waxes poetically about porn, and this is probably how anti-porn crusaders think everyone who watches/reads it thinks. I'll spare you the details of Hammerhead's soliloquy here. Let's just say the word pretentious popped into my head several times while he was talking. Hood finds Sue using the shower in his quarters, and he asks her how she ended up here. She casually mentions having been in just her underwear at a nightclub when she overheard... no need to get into it, she was just stalking Hood again. After getting away from Sue, well, temporarily at least, she's in the rest of the movie, Hood sneaks into Hammerhead's office on the yacht and finds a hidden door. He enters and finds a secret control room and some of Hammerhead's henchmen taking the old man from the elevator out of a crate and into a room where we hear Hammerhead slapping him around, demanding to know where some item we don't know about yet is. Hood soon sees Hammerhead leaving the yacht on one of the smaller boats attached to it, a crate like the one the older man was in on board, and he's taking Sue with him. Hood takes an even smaller boat to follow. This has the hallmarks of the start of the last act of a movie, which is why it's odd we aren't even actually halfway through yet. Hood had to fight his way out off the yacht after all. Even James Bond doesn't usually blow his cover that quickly. And his attitude towards his cover stories in a lot of those movies tends to be, whatever. Hood makes it to the roof of the villa Hammerhead had gone to, just in time to see Hammerhead, his bodyguard, and another associate leave via car. And the taxi that Hood had taken to the property is currently stuck in the sand. Whoops. Hood does manage to come across the man from the elevator, now in even worse shape, and tries to help him escape. This leads to an extended fight scene where one of the guards of the villa stumbles across them. Hood loses this fight too, and the guard manages to shoot the elevator man in the stomach before Hood finally takes him down using a car door and sending him rolling down a hill. Our hero is kind of bad at this. And also I'm apparently supposed to believe that roll was fatal to the guard, who doesn't go that fast and we don't see him hit his head or anything. Hood tries to take the man to a hospital in a car taken from the villa, but he dies before he can get there. Although he is able to impart some information to Hood that becomes important later. This leads to Hood being chased by a local police officer, and it makes sense in context, while a song with the only lyric I can make out being the title of the movie plays for some reason. This seems like a thing that should have gone either at the start or end of the movie, but okay. Hammerhead's not even in this scene, it's just... why? Hood goes into a nightclub to lay low, there's a song sequence, yada yada. The further along this goes, the less I can bring myself to care. How are we only halfway through at this point? Anyway, of course Hood runs into Sue at the club. She agrees to help Hood retrieve something from the post office before Hammerhead can get to it. We cut to the post office where two of the people working for Hammerhead get into a fight and one of them kills the other one, but seems to flee when the lights come on. Sue quite literally finds the package she's looking for by accident after tripping. It turns out the killer was still there. Sue, a postal employee, and a club patron who had a crush on Sue end up playing keep away with the package. And this segment was almost funny. But unlike a lot of things in this movie, it actually needed to be longer. We needed every friggin' step of Hood breaking into the villa, but this actually funny segment gets like 10 seconds, tops. Boo. The package, by the way, contained a reel-to-reel tape that eventually we learn was video of some kind of speech and also footage taken from a distance of some family that the now dead employee of Hammerhead worked for. Hood seems to know the significance of this, but we don't find out, as when he leaves the theater he bribed a projectionist into letting him watch the reel in, he's sucker-punched and knocked out by two men. Once again, our hero is very bad at this. Both he and Sue end up getting taken by Hammerhead's men, as Hammerhead owns the nightclub Hood had gone to, it turns out. And of course, rather than just shooting them, he arranges to have them have an accident and drown off the side of his yacht. Meanwhile, the family from the film who is the target for whatever Hammerhead is planning leaves for a concert. In the hearse that Hood and Sue are being smuggled out of Hammerhead's compound in towards their impending doom, the two are trying to break free of their ropes in the coffin they've been put in, and the dialogue here is meant to be innuendo-laden. I say meant to as opposed to is because the camera is on their hands trying to loosen the ropes as they're talking, which really ruins the joke. Yada yada. Man, I'm sure that some of this stuff going on in the last act here is important. Maybe even that detour to a hippie beach party that lasts for like 3 minutes. Though I honestly think it's just padding, but I just can't bring myself to care. Something about the father of this family slipping away to do the secret NATO meeting I mentioned way back in the script during the concert, and replacing him with an impersonator who used to date one of the other dancers at the club Sue worked at. Even Hood is not entirely sure how it's supposed to work. But it does, as using a hidden passage in the concert hall, Hammerhead's bodyguard is able to get the drop on and somehow quietly kill the father, named Sir Richard. And both part of the plan, the impersonator, and taking Hood and Sue to their deaths, are delayed and stuck in the same spot, pretty much, by a random truck in the middle of a narrow road. Regardless of this, the impersonator makes it to the meeting, and Hood and Sue are still stuck in the coffin. I just hope they don't try to show us the whole meeting the Sir Richard impersonator has infiltrated. I wouldn't put it past the movie at this point. Oh, thank goodness they aren't. Hood and Sue manage to escape due to sheer dumb luck when Hammerhead's henchmen mistake two people talking to the police and pointing in their general direction for talking about them, and in their attempt to flee, crash their hearse and its escort. Hood and Sue take off on a stolen motorcycle, it makes sense in context, as the NATO meeting draws to a close and the impersonator is getting ready to leave, the impersonator having been casually dropping signs of an impending heart attack throughout his scenes. So I can see where that's supposed to go. Also, the score in this scene starts to sound like the Jaws theme for a second. Except this movie predates Jaws by almost a decade, so that was weird. Hood and Sue arrive at the meeting site well after the impersonator has left and is recording information off a top-secret document onto a miniature tape recorder in the bathroom of a cafe. Hood learns this and has to turn around, and we are shown every second of that, including Sue's backside jiggling as the bike goes up some stairs. This climax is really being dragged out. There's still 12 minutes of this. They get to the concert hall. Hood gets inside just in time for the body of the real Sir Richard to be discovered, and Sue went off to chase the club owner she spotted sneaking out. Well, turns out the club owner was Hammerhead's girlfriend, or other girlfriend, I guess, because the woman dancing on the boat was supposed to be a girlfriend as well. And she, Sue, gets captured by Hammerhead and his bodyguard. Off-screen, of course, because the movie tries to keep anything interesting to a bare minimum. As they head towards a rendezvous with a helicopter, Hammerhead has his bodyguard kill the impersonator, who is struggling to keep up due to a leg cramp, and when the club owner tries to intervene, she's knocked off the rocks and falls to her death rather unceremoniously. All of this is happening on the beach near where that party we spent a couple of pointless minutes with earlier is happening. Hood and his two British peers end up here too, following a secret tunnel they spotted when the villains left part of a shoelace sticking out of the hidden entrance. And the Hammerhead song comes back for no reason as the helicopter lowers the closet with a chair down for Hammerhead, his bodyguard, and Sue. Well, I suppose that was the reason, wasn't it? Anyway, the two British agents manage to gun down the bodyguard when Hood is able to sneak up behind and get Sue out of the line of fire while Hammerhead is being airlifted. And then, okay, so remember the dancer and other girlfriend, I guess? The one from Hammerhead's yacht? Her name was Ivory. Well, she's at the hippie party and spots Hammerhead's travel closet dangling from below the helicopter, not having been pulled all the way up yet, and she grabs a harpoon gun. And we see the harpoon go all the way through, and we hear Hammerhead yell, but the implication is pretty clear here, even though we don't actually see the body, but 1960s, what are you going to do? Not going to lie, that was actually a nicely done twist. I didn't see it coming, but it didn't feel completely out of nowhere. Well done. Well done, movie. You get 1 point. And the helicopter just drops the closet into the ocean. Not even sure how the crew even noticed, but whatever. Our villain is defeated, and our hero had pretty much nothing to do with it. Sue joins Ivory in dancing with the hippies. Hood almost leaves her behind, but unfortunately doesn't, so, that was a dramatic 8 seconds. They kiss. Of course. The end. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. Well, more random thoughts. I kind of went off on my thing about it. It's kind of switching back and forth between pastiche and parody. 1. So much stuff happens in the first 20 minutes of this movie, I found myself wondering if I'd been watching for longer than I actually was and just lost track of time. The movie, despite everything I said, is fairly well-paced. I can give it that much. Well, actually, no. Now that I think about it, why did I write that? It's not that well-paced at all. Showing every step of Hood breaking into the villa, and then showing every step of Hood having to turn the motorcycle around after realizing the Sir Richard impersonator had already left the NATO meeting. Just, why did I say it was well-paced? What was I thinking? Oh, well, moving on to 3. The movie must have been coming up short, because I don't... Oh, I'd forgotten I wrote this part. Yeah, the movie must have been coming up short because I don't think we needed to see every single step of Hood sneaking into the lower deck of the yacht or into the villa after Hammerhead had gone to shore. At least we were spared the entirety of the boat trip and the taxi ride. This segment is going so well. 4. The music in this movie, from the score to the original songs, is not good. But worse than that, they're not even bad in an interesting way. And 5, the part with the harpoon gun was literally my favorite scene in the movie. In fact, I liked it enough that it alone will keep this movie out of the worst in set ranking in the season wrap-up. Final verdict. For a movie that is, well, several scenes I just mentioned aside, kind of fast-paced, possibly a little too fast-paced, very little actually seems to happen. As repetitive as the score can be, at least its presence manages to distract what could have otherwise been seen as pointless filler. Honestly, all told, the movie's just kind of dull. Really. I mean, the movie's definitely not good enough to recommend watching it for the story, but it's not really bad enough to recommend watching it to make fun of. It just is. This movie is a movie. Looking at my script here, I think I'm realizing that I think I might have meant to rewrite the final verdict section at one point and then just forgot. My point still stands. The movie is a movie. It exists. Tune in next time for the final regular episode of Season 10, The Executioner, a movie which I had thought might be based on the series of novels of the same name, but it doesn't look like it. More on that when we actually get to that episode, however. Have fun, stay safe, free Palestine.